A sufficient and reliable power supply is essential to economic productivity. Our next guest recently wrote these words. He also wrote that some politicians fail to grasp that fact. Donald Bryson is President and Chief Strategy Officer at the John Locke Foundation. And Donald, your column has this headline, North Carolina needs an energy plan that will work. Why did you want to focus on this issue?
Well, with the incoming Biden administration, one of the first things that President Biden did was reinstitute the United States presence in the Paris Climate Agreements, which are a very aggressive climate agreement across I forget how many nations at this point, to essentially reduce, for the United States, carbon emission levels through 30% below 2005 levels, not below current levels, but below 2005 levels. In the interim, during the time that President Trump, between the time that the Paris protocols were created until now, while President Trump was in place and had removed the United States from the Paris protocols, Governor Roy Cooper had actually signed an agreement among several states, had published a letter and signed Executive Order 80 to put in North Carolina to honor North Carolina's portion of the Paris Climate Agreement, which he said that the Department of Environmental Quality should put together a clean energy plan, a CEP. And with that, the plan that has come out of DEQ is actually far more aggressive than the Paris protocols. They want to go to 40% below the 2005 carbon emission levels. The problem with all of these plans, and we can get into the details as you want, but the problem with all of these plans is that it doesn't allow for affordable and reliable power to the North Carolina economy, which is essential to everything that we do, particularly the largest sectors of our economy, including agriculture and manufacturing.
Yeah, you mentioned that this, in your column, that this really does seem to be counterproductive to what we need to have if we're going to have a flourishing society, and that is low-cost, easily available energy. All of these things that President Biden and Governor Cooper are talking about would run counter to that.
That's right. And this isn't really even a pro-fossil fuel argument. It is an anti-what's-in-front-of-us argument. It's an anti-Paris Climate Agreement argument. And if you look at the plan that Governor Cooper's administration has put together, their plan is to decarbonize all of North Carolina's electricity by 2050. The problem with that is, one, some of the power sources they want to rely on are not carbon neutral, and in that they want to rely on biogas, which is gathering methane from landfills or hog farms and that sort of thing, which, by the way, is an organic product, and if you burn it, will produce carbon and put it into the atmosphere. And along with that, that tells us that they have relied on fuel sources or electricity sources that have really deep pockets down at the General Assembly and have a lot of lobbyists down there and have lobbied the governor's administration. We know that there are two power sources that are absolutely clean right now and dispatchable. We have them in North Carolina, and we could expand them to some extent, and that would be nuclear energy and hydroelectric energy. Almost the entire state of Tennessee is powered by hydroelectric energy. Our rivers aren't quite as big as the Tennessee River, but still, it's a form of energy that could be dispatched, and we know that it's marketable right now. The problem is when you read the Clean Energy Plan put out by the Cooper administration to keep in line with the priorities of the Biden administration, they really discount hydroelectric and nuclear. It's not anything they're interested in at all. Instead, we want offshore wind platforms, more solar energy, which there are a host of problems that the John Locke Foundation has written on with solar energy, and then of course biogas, which pass. I'll take a hard pass on that one.
One of the key points of your column is that North Carolina would pay a special price for this. Every state is going to see an impact from the Biden administration getting back into the Paris Climate Agreement. But in North Carolina, because of our economy, it's especially bad for us.
It is. We rely on manufacturing pretty heavily. We also rely on agriculture, but states that rely on manufacturing tend to have more volatility when the economy goes up and down. Also, when there are variations in the cost of power. We know from a 2016 report from the Heritage Foundation that it will overall cost about 400,000 jobs, and those are 2016 numbers, but about 400,000 jobs nationally. And I think it's $2.25 trillion in GDP that we'll lose if we keep in the Paris Climate Agreement. North Carolina, I think about 10.36% of our workforce are in manufacturing, and manufacturing accounts for more than 18% of our economic output. We're going to take a a huge toll, in particular among states, if we stay down this path, because we need reliable and affordable energy, and it's something that the Cooper administration and the Biden administration seem to be deaf to.
One of the things that you point out is that the Cooper Clean Energy Plan seeks to fully replace 44.65%, so nearly half of North Carolina's electrical energy production, with a finite list of renewable energy sources. That's a big change. We're not talking about 2%, 5%, even 25%. We're talking about half, basically.
Right. By 2050, the goal of the Clean Energy Plan, as I said, is to completely decarbonize electricity or electrical production in North Carolina. And to your point, 44.65% comes from carbonized fuel sources, whether that's natural gas or coal. And we're going, if we continue down this path, we're going to have to figure that out. The problem is the sheer amount of land that it will take up to put that many solar panels in the ground or wind turbines in the ground, and I don't know how many hog farms that's going to require on biogas. It's not really a sustainable plan to put together at this point. Let's look at things that we know that work. Nuclear energy works in North Carolina. There are places that we could probably expand hydroelectric in some places. And now I'm sort of an all of the above approach if it works. The problem is that this power has to be reliable and it has to be affordable. And these three fuel sources don't really work that well. Biogas in particular is a great idea in theory, particularly with such a huge agriculture presence with swine and poultry all over North Carolina. The problem is, can we actually dispatch it? Can we actually put electrons into cables and get that electricity to houses? And it's not widely available or widely marketable at this point.
Bottom line for your column is, if our economy's life is dependent on energy, then our current course of the Biden and Cooper administrations will be a death blow to untold numbers of jobs. Is that the key point that we need to keep in mind?
That's an absolutely key point. What we're told with the Paris Climate Agreement is that we need to save the environment due to climate change. We'll set that. So let's assume that the arguments for climate change are true. Even if the United States stays with the Paris Climate Agreement, we're only going to reduce global warming by a fraction of a degree over the next 30 to 40 years. Compare that to the actual toll that we're going to take on jobs in North Carolina. There was a report put out by then the Department of Energy, Environment and Natural Resources, now DEQ, in 2015 that talked about the Renewable Portfolio Standard in North Carolina, and they contracted out with a company called LaCapra. LaCapra reported back and said, look, we've created a lot of jobs due to renewables in North Carolina, but that number of jobs is dwarfed by the sheer number of jobs that we've probably killed by relying on more expensive energy sources.
The headline of the column at CarolinaJournal.com, once again, is North Carolina Needs an Energy Plan That Will Work. Its author is Donald Bryson, President and Chief Strategy Officer at the John Locke Foundation. Thanks so much, Donald.
Thank you, Mitch.